Okay, hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks very much for joining us on the latest webinar in the Blue Thread series. Really looking forward to this one. It's a great topic to discuss, and as usual, we have some great guests to chat it through with. So hopefully the next hour or so you'll see will be something that you'll learn, and I think also will meet some people that I think are quite strong in this field internationally. So what are we going to talk about? It's all about net zero in the water sector. So carbon net zero in the global water sector. And I think empowering change is a really interesting sort of a subheading, because we chose the topic, obviously, I think because of the recent COP28 event in Dubai, which I was privileged to attend myself on behalf of RSK. And since I came back, many people have been asking me what I thought and whether I thought it was a waste of time, whether I should have gone, whether I shouldn't have gone. And I hope today will explain why, well, among some of the reasons why I think it's important that I was there and that people who are representing the water sector are there. So, I mean, I think today we've sort of gone beyond sort of climate denial, and I don't think anyone, who's credible would really deny the facts that the planet is on track to exceed the mean global temperature rise from pre-industrial levels of 1.5 degrees, the one that was agreed in Paris in 2015. Those Paris Accords, as they're commonly known, have been ratified by all countries throughout the world and the EU, except for three, and Iran, Libya, and Yemen. Obviously, the USA withdrew in 2020, and then the Joe Biden brought them back in 2021. So essentially, the world came together in 2015, said, 1.5 degrees is the maximum we can tolerate as a planet. And now I think we are heading beyond that. The cause, I think the second thing that nobody would deny, is the cause of the global rise in temperature is man-made and is caused by existing or emitting continuing carbon emissions. So even if the large oil producing countries, and it was obvious in COP28, I think it's fair to say that there was a lot of representation from oil companies or oil producing companies, but it wasn't Dubai, Saudi Arabia were there as well, and lots of other countries. But I think even those countries and even those companies, I think, accept the premise that as a planet, our current carbon emissions are unsustainable, and we need to achieve carbon net zero globally as quickly as possible. The issue is, of course, how we do that, okay, without affecting the economies of everybody and what have you. So that's what the negotiations are about. But I think the base of we need to reduce carbon to net zero as quickly as possible, I think, is probably accepted. So I think first some housekeeping before I get on with the webinar. I think during the webinar your microphones are muted, but please get involved and post questions on the chat. I think hopefully we'll have some time for discussion at the end. We try to get through as many as we can. Please don't be shy. And don't worry if you think the question is too basic, don't worry about that, because people ask some fairly simple questions. And I think if you want to ask it, I can guarantee there's 20 other people on this webinar who want to ask it as well. So, and they want to hear the answer. So we're also on social media platforms with hashtag the Blue Thread. So all your usual social media. So please use and get the message out to as many people as we can, so we can build this community. And people have asked me what is the community here, and essentially it's about education, about discussion. It's very much about trying to get us all talking and thinking about water as a critical part of our world and the way we go forward. So for any people who are here for the first time, a very warm welcome to you. My name is Mark Smith. I am the Water Sector Director for RSK, and I've been in the sector for many years, over 3 decades now. And I think after all this time, I do remain very curious about how we interact with water as a society, and how that has changed and how it's developing over time. I think I do believe that most people will experience climate change through their interactions with water. And whereas hot temperatures or very hot temperatures make it very difficult to live somewhere, an absence of water makes it impossible to live somewhere. So I think as a sector, as a community, as a population, we're not active enough, and I don't believe we're getting that message out there enough. Water was barely mentioned at COP28 until the end. And despite, I think, some great work by particularly the Stockholm International Water Institute, among others as well, water is still not getting the attention it needs in today's society, I think. And that's strange, isn't it? You'd imagine everybody knows water. People don't understand what 1.5 degrees increase in average global temperatures means, but people do understand lack of water crisis, etc. And yet we talk about carbon as if we know about it, but I'm not sure a lot of people understand carbon, but we do understand water. So today, empowering change, carbon net zero and the global water sector. That's what we're going to talk about. And it is a complicated one. And I think what has that got to do with the water industry is obviously the question. So to me, the water industry has a very, very important part to play in any net zero strategy because it is a very heavy user of energy. I've said in the past many, many times that water is heavy. 1 cubic meter of water weighs a ton. And we move an enormous amount of water around the UK, around the world actually. And in the UK alone, there are almost 350,000 kilometers of pipes of all shapes, sizes, age, materials, construction, but they all do one thing: they all move water. They all carry water, and all that water takes energy to move it. So to get it up the hill, you got to pump it, and then it goes down the hill. Obviously, it depends on topography, but we pump an awful lot of water. That's where that takes energy. The second largest source of energy usage in the water sector is wastewater treatment. And I think globally, the most common form of wastewater treatment is the activated sludge process. And that is essentially a process that consists of taking an energy source, sewage, putting it in a tank, adding oxygen to it through air or oxygen, and to encourage bugs to grow. The bugs grow, consume the substrate, and actually then the bugs sort of form a flock, or they join together, and we separate the clean water from the biomass. The clean water goes into the environment, but this whole process is activated through oxygen. Again, very energy intensive. And then to compound the problem, those aeration tanks are open. They're open to the air. If you try to see them on a train or fly in a plane, you see them. And as you put the oxygen or the air up through it, they emit nitrous oxygen, which is also greenhouse gas as a side effect. We also digest the biosolids produced from wastewater treatment. That digestion process produces methane, which is another greenhouse gas. And that is, of course, used nowadays to generate electricity, which we then use as offsetting some of the energy sources within the treatment process. But we then produce a stable sludge, which is spread on the land, particularly in the UK and Europe. It's spread on the land as a soil conditioner, where, of course, over time degrades and emits carbon. So I think the global water sector is a net emitter of carbon. And indeed, in the UK, water is the third or fourth most energy intensive industry, and accounts for about 8% of our energy footprint. So it is really, really interesting that just before COVID, and I remember going to a meeting down in London, I think it was February, March 2020, it was great fanfare that Water UK launched its 2030 operational net zero route map. And that is I encourage anyone to have a look at that. It's available online. Just Water UK operation net zero route map. And anyone who wants to understand in more detail where the water industry expends its energy, you can see it there. Spoiler alert, most of it comes from National Grid. Okay, so most of it is electricity. So it's a difficult subject, and I think it's really interesting to have the conversation that we're going to have. And I have 3 fantastic guests to help us navigate through the whole weeds of it from different parts of the world. So up first is Dawn McGregor, and Dawn is a consultant on water, climate, business and disruptive risks with a think tank based in Asia called CWR. So Dawn leads CWR's engagements to help companies and sectors navigate the fast evolving risk landscape. She's very well connected, and her access to global water leaders and intergovernmental panel on climate change authors gives her some really interesting insights into the challenges in ensuring the water security under climate change. Now, I met Dawn last August in Stockholm at World Water Week, and we discussed this topic, and we said we should continue the conversation. So I'm delighted she's been able to make it today, because I know you've been ill with COVID, Dawn, so we'll forgive you if you're a bit croaky. But hopefully you're well enough to give us basically an overview, global overview, of net zero approach. And over to you, Dawn. Thanks very much.
Thanks so much, Mark. I'm happy to be here. Like you said, continuing our conversation from Stockholm. Today, I'm going to give you the real high level kind of conversation and big pictures around why water and energy, and particularly net zero for the water industry, is so important and so misunderstood. So And, you know, a little backdrop as well was COP28 happening. It wasn't that long ago, you know, UN Sec-Gen Guterres said, you know, we've opened the gate to climate hell, and water is how we're going to feel it, and potentially kind of close those gates a bit again, which really makes the case for a net zero water industry. Just moving on to the next slide. Makes it hard with the white background. There we go. So just a quick little bit about CWR for those who don't know us. We are a think tank, headquarters in Hong Kong. I'm based in Singapore, and we work primarily with business and investors around unpacking the complex and interlinked water and climate risks. We also work with governments and academia to stay on top of the latest policy and science. And what we really do is assess and unpack the risks, because not many people really know what their water and climate risks mean, help formulate strategies, and adapt. Could go to the next slide, please. My controls seem to have disappeared. So, water, we're here for water. Ooh, back one slide, please. Thanks. We're here to talk water, and my first slide says climate change, and that's because climate change is water change. And, you know, as Mark has said, at the global conversations, be it COP and others, climate conversations, that is, water is very much treated as carbon's very distant, very strange cousin, little cousin, often forgotten. But water is the most vulnerable resource to climate change, and it's how we feel the climate impacts. You know, if you go to the next slide, we have on the far left, too much water, and that's floods. And, you know, in the last year and a half, 2 years, the whole world, be it Asia, APAC, Europe, the US, there's been some mammoth floods. I mean, a third of Pakistan was underwater. And then the opposite, too little water, droughts. And again, this has been a huge issue, you know, we're seeing in Asia, disrupting supply chains, but it's also the drying up of rivers, you know, pre-drought. And we're seeing that in the US, in the Colorado area, you know, in Europe with the Rhine and the Po rivers. And then on the far right, we've got atmospheric water changes, we've got wildfires, we've got freak snowstorms. Water is how we feel climate change. And so that's one way to get it kind of at the top of the discussion. And then next slide, thanks. And a bit of a reality check. We set the 1.5 target at the Paris Agreement by 2100. Normally these slides have some animation, so we get to the big wow, but you can see it's all there. There's now a 66% chance of reaching 1.5 by 2027. That's just 3 years from now. We're 70 years, backslash, 70 years ahead of schedule. And actually, the latest report, you know, the Global Stocktake UN EP gap emissions report says we're really more on track for 3 degrees. Every point of a degree, it sounds maybe small, but it matters. Every point of degree, you're still talking millions of more people exposed to water stress, to sea level rise, to drought. And if we want to keep 1.5 alive, we have to cut global emissions by 43% by 2030. That's a huge target. So net zero and how we get there. So we talked water risks, then we talked how water is climate risks and climate change. And then we understood where we are in climate and how we need to cut emissions. And cutting emissions, our global approach to that is net zero in most places by 2050. Mitigation. And from this conversation, water just isn't there. It's not on the table. And it's surprising because, you know, as Mark mentioned, when it's hot, we struggle, but the absence of water, we just cease to exist. And so we need to future-proof our water supply. And that means getting water to net zero. At the moment, water utilities account for around 2% of global greenhouse gases. But if you bring in the whole water management industry, including wastewater, you're looking more close to 10% of global GHGs. And at the moment, 80% of global wastewater isn't treated. So if you put that in, this would shoot up. Energy consumption is set to double by 2040. So the sector is going to become way more energy intensive. And at the moment, around 80 out of hundreds of water utilities and wastewater treatment utilities have net zero targets. It's a start. And, we're seeing some positive movement from the leaders. You've got the UK, although there's been a bit of backtracking there. Some in Australia, we've got Singapore, and I know Jing from RSK will go into the details about that. Super interesting stuff. But we're still only talking 80 out of hundreds. We need to get this to being everybody. We need to fast track this. And in our conversations, around this topic, we've kind of seen one of the biggest challenges is the lack of a roadmap. One is a lack of conversations and discussion about this. Although, at World Water Week, Mark and I held our talk show, we got lots of great feedback, and there were a few other events around net zero, but it's really still just an emerging topic within water. So, outside of water, no one's talking net zero water, and this is what we need to change. We need to really fast track these conversations. To help in the sector and outside the sector, we need some roadmaps. Everyone's kind of doing their own thing. No one really understands what it means. So we're not talking complicated, but just start with a high-level roadmap, get that conversation going, and we can go from there. And one thing CWR, we do a lot is also engagement with the financial community. And, with pushing for net zero, looking for green finance, this is an area where that exists, so hence in green there, dollar opportunities. You're talking 10 million tons of greenhouse gas emissions saved if the UK achieves its net zero targets for the water utilities. It's significant, and that's financial opportunities that investors are looking for. So we really need to get going on this. Next. And this is a report we actually came out with just about 2 months ago. And it looks, and you might be thinking, why is there a report about China's ICT transition? Why am I talking about it? Because this was also a sector that's being neglected. It's a high impact emissions sector, but it's being overlooked. So what we found was that the 5 Hong Kong exchange listed China ICT companies, Alibaba, Tencent, China Mobile, and Xiaomi, I'm sure you've heard of most, not all. If they commit to net zero, we could save 87 million tons of carbon equivalent. That's 2.5 times the emissions of Hong Kong. And that's just from 5 companies. And for reference there, you can see the UK's emissions at 340. There are sectors that are overlooked. And this is why we did this one. Just 5 companies. And the ICT sector, like water, is going to be a booming sector. It's something we're not going to live without. And with the rise of ChatGPT, bots, AI, it's going to grow even more. So it's a sector that needs net zero focus and fast tracking, just like water. So we've had a lot of good response to this. So we're wanting and thinking, could we do something around water, the water sector here? So if you have any ideas, please feel free to reach out to me, because CWR, we're all about the water, and we'd really like to get this net zero conversation moving faster. Next slide. And this is my last slide. And we purposely do this to end. It's a picture of ice in the background. And you might be thinking, why ice? You know, gone through carbon, water, ice now. Ice is where it all starts, where water all starts. The melt from the glaciers is what feeds Asia's 10 key rivers, from the Hindu Kush, Himalayas. And then, you know, we're facing a lot of freshwater threats, water scarcity, water pollution, you know, competing interests and demands on water, increasing populations. And then you think ice, you can think the poles, the Arctic, Antarctic. And with that accelerated melt, because it's actually warming in the poles, it's warming faster than it is. And we're already at 1.2 C there, it's much higher. You know, we're getting the melt of those key ice blocks, which is leading to sea level rise, which we have severely underestimated and will have impacts. So knowing your water risk exposure, it's not easy. And that's why it's hard to read the text on there. And that's why we do what we do, and hope that joining discussions, great discussions and webinars like these really helps get that message out. And that's me. Thanks so much.
Thanks very much, Dawn. I think, I mean, I don't know, when I listen to you or other people, you know, you think, do I feel depressed or do I feel inspired?
We are known as kind of the doomsday bringers, you know. People tend to leave a bit, depressed, frightened. But you know, nowadays there's so much out there. You have to sometimes scare people to get the change. So
from your point of view, then, Dawn, I mean, I'm just very quickly, what are the key takeaways from COP for water?
So actually, we're just today I finished writing the article for our newsletter that will be going out this week, and it was a pretty close call there at the end whether we'd actually get a global agreement, you know, around transitioning away from fossil fuels, and some interesting comments from the COP28 president. But we've done it. At least there's some hope, you know, we can get our act together. And on the waterfront specifically, COP27 actually had its own day for water. So in some ways, this feels a bit like a step back, you know, when you're talking water. I mean, water was day 10, I think, and it was with food and agriculture, which is super important. You know, you've got the water energy nexus.
It was actually, to be fair, it was drowned in food and agriculture.
Yeah,
you know,
so that's a little bit our feeling. You know, you've got water energy nexus, but you've got water energy food nexus, you've got water energy food climate nexus, and you know, the others tend to get the focus. I mean, there was some small encouraging news, you know, more countries signing up to the 30, you know, freshwater challenge, check 30% of freshwater by 2030. You've got some more funding. I mean, it was positive to see, you know, that within the goal for global adaptation, there was a specific water target. So at least in terms of adaptation, water is becoming more prominent. Water on its own, I mean, it's still the same lens. It's fresh water, it's conserve it, and it's very much still on the sidelines, you know. Water for climate starting to get a little ahead in the conversation. But one thing, and it links to my last slide about the ice, you know, there is actually there were pavilions done by the ICCI, which is, if you forgive me, I can't quite remember the acronym, but it's the ICE, you know, Climate Coalition something. And they're pushing that message across about how quickly and faster than we thought ice is melting, and the impacts that's going to have, you know, on global supply chains, on sea level rise, and how we really 2C is too high for ice. You know, it'll just be so irreversibly lost, and the impact on sea level rise will just be almost too great for us to be able to adapt for.
Okay, well, on that happy note, Dawn, thank you very much indeed.
My pleasure.
So if you hang around, I think we'll obviously have some more questions. If you hang around, that'll be great towards the end. Thank you very much, Dawn.
Sure.
So from Singapore, I'm delighted to say we now have Catherine Price with us in the UK. So Catherine is the head of sustainability and environment at MWH Treatment, who are the largest design and build contractor in the UK water industry. Catherine leads MWH's sustainability and responsible business approach, and she has over 20 years experience in utilities and the construction sector. And most of the money, certainly, you know, in the water sector is on capital spend. It's on creating assets. So I think it's really, really interesting that Catherine's going to be able to talk to us a bit about the company's net zero carbon commitment and the responsible business strategy, as well as, you know, some of the other stuff she does, talks about value chain and carbon management and reduction. So I guess, Catherine, hopefully you're going to talk to us a little bit about carbon net zero in the supply chain, and over to you. Thank you very much.
So yes, hi everyone. As MWH Treatment is a tier 1 contractor, design and build for UK water companies, we are currently supporting the water sector with reducing our carbon emissions and also reducing that of our supply chain, particularly regarding purchased goods and services. I'm finalising our net zero long-term strategy to achieve net zero ahead of 2050, and today I'm going to cover with yourselves a few steps that we're taking. So to start off, what is net zero? Well, it's where human-based residual greenhouse gas emissions are balanced by human-led removals over a specified period and within specified boundaries. And to be truly net zero, all scope 3 emissions do need to be addressed where they are significant. So to kind of put it all into context, what are MWH Treatment scope 3 emissions? Well, we've always calculated the indirect emissions from business travel and waste. However, over the last 2 years, we've widened this to include commuting, home working, purchased goods and services, capital goods, fuel and energy related activities, upstream transportation, distribution, leased assets and use of sold products. So you imagine that's been quite a task and a half to calculate that over the last 2 years. So we've taken all this data and we are now establishing our strategy. So already being having a sustainable, responsible business approach, and it's one of our 6 business priorities. It's embedded within our company vision, purpose and values, including our value to be safe, well and sustainable. We have 3 values and each one links with 2 sustainable development goals, which our business can significantly contribute to, and that includes climate action. Leadership and commitment is very important with establishing a strategy, and our net zero ambition is led from the top by our chief executive. But once you have leadership on board, where do you start? Well, my background is in environmental management systems, and for MWH Treatment, the ISO net zero guidelines has provided a good framework for us, which aligns well with our integrated management system, because I'm very conscious that net zero is not to be managed in a silo to business activities and processes, and it needs to be fully embedded throughout the organisation. Establishing a boundary is also important, especially with scope 3 emissions. Our boundary incorporates joint ventures, our contribution within partner alliances, direct activities and our supply chain. The guidelines generally follow the same areas as ISO standards, but particularly it does include addressing residual emissions and also the wider impact outside of the business. So this is where there's wider consideration of stakeholders, adding social value and also looking at biodiversity net gain. So just kind of where we started. So when calculating carbon emissions and removals, third-party verification schemes should be used to ensure transparency and credibility, and the scheme to comply with methodologies such as ISO 14064 and the Greenhouse Gas Protocol. At MWH, we've actually been part of the Achilles Carbon Reduce programme for over 10 years now. And through that, we set objectives and targets. We look at short, medium and long-term targets. For our short and medium targets, we have a route map to be operational net zero by 2030, and that includes year-on-year targets and objectives to achieve that. And one of those examples is a 6.5% reduction in carbon emissions from site fuel use in plant and equipment during this financial year. The reason for that is that the fuel used in plant equipment is by far our highest operational emission source. Medium term wise, an example is to reduce absolute Scope 1 greenhouse gas emissions by 50% by 2030 from a 2019 base year. And then longer term wise to achieve net zero, including the supply chain by 2045. And with these, need to incorporate science-based targets. These are industry accepted, independently verified. Many of our water company clients now expect their tier 1 contractors, including ourselves, to have an SBT in place over the next few years. For us, RSK as our parent company, the SBT application is currently undergoing approval by the SBT initiative. So with ourselves, our supply chain purchase goods and services emissions is about almost 10 times greater than our organised operational carbon footprint. So we're looking at prioritising our supply chain and who do we concentrate on. So we're looking at assessing our supply chain and looking at level of risk. So prioritising those high risk suppliers or sectors with high greenhouse gas emissions, or that present a potential reputational risk to the business. The ability to influence as well, so prioritise key suppliers where we buy a significant proportion of their overall outputs, and direct suppliers, so those that we're not working through an agent or a distributor. Level of impact as well, so say targeting our top 10 suppliers by spend as well. Also, we're going to assess looking at potential opportunities, so those suppliers or parts of the supply chain that can provide the biggest opportunities to cut emissions and make cost savings. From the graph, you can see that when we calculated our Scope 3 of purchased goods and services for 2022, by far the highest emitter was concrete and cement, followed by plant and equipment hire and purchase, and electrical equipment and works. We've then got fabricated metal and also aggregates as well. With all this and prioritising our supply chain, it's really important to decide how and what to communicate to the supply chain, and this is to ensure that the message is easily understood and support is provided. So taking all this information, we are currently drafting our net zero long-term route map and action plan. There's already ongoing actions at the moment, plus ones that we are looking at applying within the business and with consultation with our stakeholders. So we've already got project online monitoring and reporting, and that's on a monthly basis, looking at concrete, aggregates, fuel, electricity consumption. We've got low carbon products and processes library, but very much at the moment it's a regional focus, and we're looking at broadening that to be organisational focus and sort of bringing our supply chain in with that as well as our clients. We also have a specific supply chain communication plan and currently developing carbon guidance as well. We have internally a site carbon smart toolkit, and we're looking at rolling that out to our supply chain and those that are working on our construction sites. RSK and MWH Treatment are partners of the Supply Chain Sustainability School, and through the school we're able to set learning pathways for our employees and our supply chain, which includes carbon management and reporting. This is to provide education, and also particularly important for ourselves as we purchase from a lot of micro, small and medium-sized enterprises that don't have the internal carbon or sustainability capabilities. We have already held carbon reporting workshops for supply chain, and it's planned to continue this throughout our net zero route map. We also require the top 85% of our supply chain based on spend to report annually their carbon footprint through the Supply Chain School's carbon calculator. And for future focus, we're looking at setting targets for prioritising the supply chain to science-based targets, particularly with off-site construction, innovation events and collaboration, working with our internal commercial procurement teams for supplier incentives, and then incorporating circular economy principles into supply frameworks, and also including that within our operation and maintenance manuals provided to the client. And finally, looking at collaboration with wider industry initiatives such as Concrete Zero and Steel Zero, both led by the Climate Group in partnership with key stakeholders. So that's kind of an overview of our current work and future focus. So back to you, Mark.
Well, thank you very much, Catherine. I've got a million questions actually, to be honest, when you listen to that. And
Oh no.
no, that's good. It's good. I think the first one is you did mention quick wins with regard to supply chain. I mean, what kind? What's in the quick wins that we haven't already done, really, to be honest?
So the quick wins for us as a business is really looking at our framework suppliers. So those suppliers that we already have long-standing working relationships with over many years, and also a lot of spend goes to our framework suppliers as well. So recent examples, we've actually established over the last 6 months site carbon requirements. So those are including that our sites can only get eco sites temporary accommodation, and our framework suppliers now will not provide us with anything other than that. We've also got, for example, using electric small plant and tools as well, and preference to that, and also preference to sort of PPE and consumables with higher sustainability credentials. We've also been working with our supply chain and reduced deliveries, so with PPE and consumables particularly, but that's something as well that we can work with the rest of our framework. And then another quick win is the work with the Supply Chain Sustainability School. We've already started with that, and it really is getting other companies upskilled in what our expectations are and what they need to do, and how we can help them with, for example, the carbon calculator, which is an easy tool with guidance to use.
So do you think, you know, with the change generally implies cost, right? Cost increase. And, you know, you mentioned, I think I wrote down concrete, cement, plant, electrical equipment and metal, right? You know, to really crack it as a tier 1 contractor, I guess you would switch from carbon intensive concrete to carbon zero concrete if it was either the cost was absorbed and you weren't penalized for doing that, or it actually was existing. I mean, where do you think the moral high ground sits within a tier 1 contractor as to whether or not you can push the client, or do you wait for the client to say, okay, we'll accept a higher cost? Where does that sort of land in your world? Because obviously I think carbon is great right up to the point of price, procurement, right? And somehow it gets lost in the dollars, doesn't it? It gets lost in the pound notes. I mean, where are you in that sort of thing? What would be MWH's responsibility towards pushing that agenda?
We still have a way to go, I'll be honest with you. It's not perfect at the moment. We do work with our clients with regards to the specifications, so there is an increased uptake in sort of using recyclable materials within the concrete, but then you've got the client specifications, and if it's in contact with water, there are restrictions with the recycled content that you can use, if you can use it. So it is very much working with the clients, and I do feel that there is more now sort of onus, and we're seeing this coming through with the AMP8 sort of bidding, is the adoption of PAS 2080, so carbon management and infrastructure, which looks at the whole value chain and the carbon savings that can be made. And I think that's really where these changes and these decisions can really, you know, come to the forefront, that we can work with the supply chain and our clients to make sure that we put them in. But we do have to consider costs, and that's something that comes back to myself with costs going, oh, well, the eco accommodation, for example, is more expensive, or the tools are more expensive, but then I'm going like, well, the amount of fuel that you're saving, you know, makes it less expensive. It's just that CapEx looks higher rather than the operational costs, which I think is that sort of issue across the board at the moment, is changing that mindset of looking at it from a whole life carbon and whole life cost, rather than,
I think it's putting carbon on an equal footing with pounds, isn't it, with finances, and I think that's a difficult one.
Definitely.
So I'm going to have to ask you about, recently when I was at COP, Thames Water produced a fantastic announcement in the middle of COP that essentially they were going to ditch the operational net zero by 2030. Obviously they're going to continue driving it down, but they feel that they cannot do it with the current restrictions. I mean, first of all, I guess, did it surprise you? And if it didn't, why not? Do you think the rest of the UK sector will now take, well, Thames have taken the hit in the press, so we can all sort of wind back that 2030 to 2035, 2040 or whatever?
I could understand why it has been delayed. I do understand that. I think I personally was hoping that people wouldn't delay it. I think once the government delayed about the petrol and diesel engines, it kind of, I think, might have opened up things a bit more for people to be able to do that and companies to be able to go back on their ambitions. However, I do understand, because our carbon footprint is going up, because we've got more awareness of what it actually includes, we've got better data collection, you know, and we're including more aspects within our footprint, and that's the same that's happening with the clients. Also, process emissions, so the operational emissions from the actual treatment, particularly with regard to nitrous oxide. There's more awareness of that now. It's still not perfect how to calculate that, but obviously that's going to substantially increase operational emissions. So I think that those kind of factors have come into play with sort of delaying the net zero. I don't think Thames will be the last ones to delay net zero. And yeah, I can appreciate that, but as a business, I still think it's really important for us to carry on with that 2030 trajectory for our operational emissions.
Okay, I appreciate the honesty. That's very good. Thanks very much, Catherine. So next up, we're going back to Asia and Singapore, and I'm delighted that we're joined by Dr. Jingjing Wang, who is a senior consultant at the RSK Centre for Sustainability Excellence in Singapore. And Jingjing obtained her PhD in environmental engineering at the National University of Singapore, and her doctoral research area is in water technology development for recalcitrant industrial wastewater treatment. So right in the middle of this, I think. Now at the centre, she currently does greenhouse gas assessment and verification services, including forecasting greenhouse gas emissions in the energy and infrastructure sectors. She's going to talk to us about water sector decarbonisation in Singapore, because they really have been at the forefront of some of this stuff. So really looking forward to this, Jingjing, and welcome.
Thank you very much, Mark. Let me see. Hi, everyone. I'm glad you joined today's webinar and share my thoughts with you about decarbonization in the water sector. So with my PhD in the environmental engineering and 6 years experience in Singapore's water sector, my presentation will focus mainly on Singapore, a vibrant water hub. Next slide, please. So the global water utilities account for about 2% of the greenhouse gas emissions. If we look at the electricity consumption of the water sector, it takes up about 4% of the world electricity. And it is estimated that we will see an 80% increase of electricity consumption in the water sector by middle of this century. So from these figures, we can see that water sector is unignorable in global warming, considering of its GHG impact, and it needs our attention and immediate action. Next slide, please. So to limit global warming with 1.5 degrees Celsius, many countries have already made commitment to achieve net zero by 2050, and Singapore is one of them. While in the water sector, Public Utilities Board, Singapore's national water agency, is steering towards the goal by 2045. Yet, this path is riddled with challenges, especially here in Singapore. The city-state is among the smallest countries in the world, and the limited freshwater resources push Singapore to be water self-sufficiency as early as possible. The natural consequence of small land area is energy or resource constraint, which requires an improvement in efficiency. And at the same time, as the third most densely populated country with high GDP, the water demand and wastewater generation capacity are continuously increasing. To meet these needs, water plants need to be scalable and upgradable. Another challenge is from climate change risks, such as heat waves and storms. Last but not least, Singapore is an aging society. The manpower shortage requires industries to reduce manpower needs. Next, please. Though challenging, Singapore is trying to achieve net zero by 3R strategy: reduce, replace, and remove. Reduce carbon emissions, replace current energy sources, and remove through capture, sequestration, and utilization. We are meticulously targeting every emission source within scope 1, 2, and 3 throughout the whole life cycle of water plants. So the first type of GHG emissions is embodied carbon, which means carbon emissions associated with the construction of a water plant. Like other infrastructure projects, we can consider carbon reduction hierarchy for embodied carbon. Firstly, we can try to avoid constructing redundant facilities or using extra materials. This is feasible by various methods, such as co-locating water plants with other facilities to achieve synergies or conducting life cycle assessment for eco-conscious design. Then we can evaluate alternative solutions and adopt those with lower carbon emissions. Here again, we can conduct LCA to select low carbon materials, such as green concrete. Where possible, we should prioritize nature-based solutions over engineering solutions. And thirdly, we can embrace circular economy principles to improve potential for resource recovery at end of life. Next slide, please. After that, operational carbon is generated during the water plant's daily activities. Let's first take a look at the Scope 1 emissions, which are directly generated on site. Regarding the volume of the greenhouse gases, nitrous oxide and methane take up a considerable portion. But at the same time, another type of greenhouse gas, sulfur hexafluoride, should not be ignored. Although the amount of SF6 emitted from water plants is less than N2O or CH4, it has global warming potential as high as 23,500 times of CO2, much higher than N2O and CH4. Next slide. So where do these gases coming from? Usually, N2O and CH4 are generated from mainstream or side stream treatment processes. For SF6, it's generated from electrical equipment. To reduce the Scope 1 emissions, we can conduct carbon accounting to identify emission sources in the plant case by case, as different plants have different processes. Based on it, we should monitor these greenhouse gases closely by installing sensors and using valid methodologies to calculate emissions. Most importantly, we need to continuously optimize processes and upgrade electrical equipment to minimize the emissions. Next slide. Coming to Scope 2, we can reduce operational carbon emissions and replace traditional energy sources with renewable energy. For emission reduction, we need to identify main energy users at the first place and find opportunities to improve the energy efficiency. And I think the key to energy efficiency is adopting innovative technologies consuming less energy. In Singapore, some technologies are becoming more and more popular, such as the membrane aerated biofilm reactor and closed-circuit reverse osmosis. At the same time, we need to change our concept, not only seeing water plant as energy consumer, it can be energy generator as well. In Singapore, the more suitable option would be installing PV panels to harness solar energy. Also, we are trying to generate other renewable energies, such as bioenergy and hydrogen. Next slide. And how about Scope 3 emissions, which relate to a much wider area of upstream and downstream value chain? I think just now Catherine has done a very good presentation about the supply chain, but here I want to use a good example from Binis, part of the RSK group. So here in Singapore, Binis is making great progress to reduce Scope 3 emissions for the Choa Chu Kang Waterworks reconstruction project by adopting latest water technologies and digital capabilities, such as advanced membrane filtration system and process digital twin with water quality prediction. So for Scope 3, I think we can consider reducing chemical consumption, membrane consumption, manpower and employee commuting and waste disposal through green procurement, technology innovation, and digitalization. Next slide. Another ongoing project in Singapore, which is a great example, is Tuas Nexus. Overall, it shows us how water sector can achieve decarbonization in synergies with other sectors such as energy and waste. Due to the limit of time, I will leave it to the Q&A and talk about more about it. Next slide. And lastly, a quick view of the carbon capture and utilization technology from UCLA collaborating with PUB for piloting in Singapore. It's a very interesting new technology, transferring dissolved carbon dioxide to carbonates as product and hydrogen as co-product. the softened seawater, which needs less energy for desalination, will return to the sea. It will have an effect of hitting 3 birds with 1 stone if successful. Next slide. So I would like to stop my sharing here, and I hope this can give you some inspiration of how the water sector can be the driving force in decarbonization and net zero. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Jingjing. I mean, really, really interesting. It always amazes me actually when we talk about water over the years. Singapore always seems to be at the forefront of sort of the next thing and the next sort of challenge, I guess. And just listening to you, you've talked about some of the amazing stuff that they're doing in Singapore, and considering the unique sort of situation of Singapore being sort of in a little island, it's got difficulties with water supply, etc., and it has unique challenges. How transferable do you think some of these experiences and methodologies are to other countries, perhaps with other or different environmental contexts? Do you think it is transferable?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. I think definitely it's transferable. Firstly, I think for example, the 3R strategy, the reduce, reuse, and recycle, is a very comprehensive framework applicable to the water sector, not only in Singapore, but also other countries, because it takes the whole value chain into the consideration. And about the challenges, I think other countries may face similar challenges of Singapore, such as limited land area, climate risks, aging society, etc. So I think they can refer to Singapore's approaches and case studies and lessons learned. But also at the same time, I think that other countries should select the best available technologies or methods based on their own situations. So for example, for the solar energy, some countries, maybe they will consider about other renewable energies such as wind or geothermal rather than solar energy. Yeah, other renewable energies. But overall, I think the Singapore's water sector decarbonization strategy offer an insightful blueprint for other countries to refer. But it's more important to tailor the strategies and use feasible methods based on the local context.
Okay. And I think ultimately, the way Singapore approaches issues and problems it's in a very coordinated fashion. Now, I know the TUIS nexus that you spoke about, and the concept of the water energy waste nexus seems promising. You perhaps skipped over it a little bit in your presentation because of time. Could you tell us a little bit more about the TUIS nexus, please?
Yeah, sure, no problem. Yeah, as I mentioned just now in presentation, I think the water, energy, and waste nexus is a very holistic approach. Actually, I like the concept that a water sector cannot and should not exist in isolation. For water plants, actually, it has a big potential beyond just treating the water for discharge or for reuse. So the so-called waste or side products from the wastewater plants, for the water plants perspective, actually can be valuable sources to other plants, such as the power plants or waste plants, and vice versa. To my understanding, I think that TUIS Nexus project is still under construction, but it will be the world's first co-located and integrated waste and water facility, so far as I know. And also, I understand that if it's being constructed, apart from treating a huge amount of domestic wastewater and industrial wastewater and municipal solid waste per day, also it can generate energy to support 100% of its operation, and the excessive energy can be sent to the grid. And overall, it can save a huge amount of carbon dioxide per year. I cannot remember the exact number, but it's very impressive. So as we see its capabilities and benefits, I think the TUIS Nexus will inspire other countries to find more and more interconnections among the sectors and achieve net zero together.
Well, I think actually that's a really good point to finish on, perhaps, that the whole idea of bringing the water, energy, and the waste sectors together, I think, is something that perhaps we have ignored. Maybe the other panelists could join us now, and we could just have a quick chat in the last few minutes that we have. But essentially, I think I'd like to ask Catherine, you work for a tier 1 contractor, Catherine, and essentially, you know, one of the big issues is construction is concrete, and there is really a sort of quite an interesting thought process going around that we shouldn't build anything anymore with concrete until we've cracked green concrete, and I know Jingjing mentioned it as well. Do you think there's enough research going on in this area? Do you think that that we should have an international forum on this? How do we move the dial? What's the step change that we do, particularly with respect to concrete?
I think there is a lot of stuff going on, and I've attended quite a lot of webinars with regards to the future of concrete, and I know there's a lot of work going on, and the Concrete Zero with the climate group that I mentioned as well. I just think that the availability isn't there, so it's kind of a lot of talking and not so much action, and trying to get sort of the trials in place as well within the business we've got. It's very ad hoc at the moment, and I don't think we're the only ones that are like that. So I think it's more ramping up, you know, the trials and the demonstration with regards to low carbon concrete, but also we're talking about sort of low carbon solutions and the processes, and it's how can we avoid actually using concrete, and what else is there available, and sort of upskilling decision making and not just opting for a concrete tank every time. So
that would be a really good thing, not opt for a concrete tank every single time.
It's always kind of like the default, isn't it? Let's put some concrete in, and it's really it's changing behaviours, and it really is a learning curve. So I think the two. So you know, the external looking.
I remember many years ago, I remember many years ago I was talking to a contractor, and he said to me, "The answer is we'll dig a hole, Mark." No, what was the question? And I think we got to get beyond the answer is a concrete tank. What was the question? So, first of all, I should say that somebody has written in and corrected me that essentially not all lower carbon options cost money, and there's case studies of project examples where they've saved tons of carbon dioxide and cost as well. And I guess that's a good one to pick me up on. I think I was just making a general point, really, that generally when we change our practices, it costs more money. But I accept that there are some really good case studies out there. But in the last few minutes, I think just a quick run around the three. What I would like to know is, what do we need to fast track the next net zero movement within the water industry? Maybe Dawn, you could have a few words on that first of all, and then maybe Jingjing, and then Catherine, you could finish it off for us. So what do we need to fast track the net zero movement within the water industry? Dawn.
So within, I think it's a little bit what I said about, and we talked about at World Water Week, was this roadmap. And also a bit to build on what Catherine said, it's changing mindsets. You know, this shouldn't be an afterthought. We should be thinking about this for everything to do with water. You know, some of the challenge is people are like, we don't even have some water supply or clean access or all of these utilities. They need upgrading and stuff. And yes, there's huge challenges in delivering clean water, but we should also be doing net zero as much as we can within that. It's not because there are these challenges that we should say, oh, net zero is too difficult. Yeah. So kind of change the conversation, get net zero in there, talked about, you know, whenever we're talking about water. And the second thing would be to articulate, you know, net zero water and the opportunities and the need for it outside of the sector. As you know, you mentioned, Mark, we're not great at talking outside of our sector, but this is one way that we can do it. You know, the net zero is very discussed now, very understood. And, you know, like I mentioned, there's a lot of green finance opportunities here, and we're going to need money to get net zero water. So let's talk to them. Let's talk outside the sector.
Yeah. And Jingjing, do you have anything to add to that in terms of what do we need to fast track the net zero movement?
Yeah, sure. I think just now, as I mentioned, actually Singapore is set a very good example of how to set up the strategy and the learning, what is the experiences in the water sector decarbonization. Well, I do think that international collaboration among sectors and countries are very important, because it encourages innovation, technology sharing, and this will be a very good way to share the best practices in the water decarbonization technologies to all of the world. Yeah, and also another thing I want to say is about the financial collaboration. Probably I know that for many of the countries, maybe it's not that developed. So for many developing countries, I mean, the financial is very important. So I think they can seek the financial support through, for example, the green finance or green bonds, yeah, to speed up the decarbonization for the water sector. Yeah.
Okay, and I think the financial instruments need to be far more imaginative and innovative than perhaps what we're seeing at the moment. Catherine, other than not stopping building concrete tanks, what more can you do to help us fast track this, please? Not you personally. I don't think you actually build many personally, but anyway.
For me, I think it's all been discussed and there's lots of discussions around it, and we just need to go ahead and start actioning it and actually doing things. I think there has been a lot of talk, and we need to really demonstrate the benefits of it and the cost savings and the carbon savings, the social value, the, you know, sort of all linked together with biodiversity net gain and all those factors as well. We just need to demonstrate it and show that it can be done, rather than keep discussing it, I think, for me.
So I think that's a fabulous note to finish it on. JFDI, I think, for those of you that know what that means. I think it just remains for me really to thank Dawn and Jingjing and Catherine and everybody who's been listening. I think there's huge amounts of things to think about in there and develop the conversations, and we need to keep talking about it. Water is utterly critical to everything we do. So thank you very much. I'll draw to a close there, and we'll see you all in January. Happy Christmas for those of you that celebrate Christmas, and Happy New Year for everybody else. Thank you. Bye-bye.